Okay, hopefully everybody can see the screen. Is that a yes?
That's a yes, we can see it.
Okay, good, very good.
Yes.
So let's have a look at, excellent. Let's have a look at Parsha Vayigash, a very, very exciting Parsha, a dramatic Parsha. And we're going to look here at the approach of Yehuda to Yosef. But before we do so, we're going to have a look at the lead up to that, which is really the last few psukim in the case. So let's have a look and see what the lead up is to this dramatic stand of Yehuda as he approaches Vayigash Elov Yehuda. So let's have a look. Vayomer lahem Yosef. Yosef says to the brothers, this is after they've now hauled them back before the viceroy of Egypt, who they don't know is Yosef yet. And of course, the crime seems to have been committed by the youngest brother, Benjamin. And Yosef says to them, what is this that you've done? Halo yadaitem, do you not know? Ki nachesh yenachesh ish asher kemoni, that a man like me can make divinations, can work out these things? Vayomer Yehuda, and Yehuda responds, Manomar ladoni, what can we say to my master? Manadaber, what can we say? Vos can we read? Manit stadok, how can we justify ourselves? Holakim matzah savayna v'decha, God has found an area now to punish us for the sin of your servants. Hinenu avodim ladoni, we are servants to my master. Gam anachnu, gam asher nimtzag v'biyadai. We, as well as the one in whose possession the goblet was found. So clearly, he's not going to let go of Benjamin. If it's going to be his slaves, if they're going to be punished, it's all of us together. To which Yosef replies, Vayomer, and he said, Chaliloli. Oh, heaven forbid. Well, it doesn't say heaven, but Chaliloli. It would be profane for me, for doing such a thing. I cannot do collective punishment. There's only one person who's done the crime. Ha'ish asher nimtza gavia biyadai, hu yele aved, he'll be a slave to me. Va'atem alula shalom alavichem, and you go up in peace to your father. That's where Parshas Miketz end, and that's where Vayigash begins. But it's interesting that Yehuda uses three expressions: manomar, manadaber, or manitzdadak. What can we say? What can we speak? How can we justify ourselves? And the Racham HaKodesh says why these three expressions are as follows. Nomar is a gentle tone. Amir abderch rotzoi. What can we say? How can we appease you? Manadaber means, what can we say harshly in a way of war? Manitzdadak, how can we justify ourselves in a mishpat, in a court case? If we appear before judges, ein miflat lahem. There's no escape. This could only be the work of God to punish for the sin. God has found a place now to collect his debt. And because the sin is in all of our hands, therefore here we are together. We are offering ourselves all as avodim to my master. But more than that, says the Rachaim, manitztadok, how can we justify ourselves? The brothers previously made a kal v'chomer. What was their kal v'chomer? They said, Ma'adach, if we have brought back the money that was put in our sacks and we brought that back to you, you think we're going to steal something from the palace? But now, this kal v'chomer is broken. It's invalid. Why? Says the Rachaim, Yehuda is now saying that now that the goblet has been found in the sack of Benjamin, in Binyamin, there's no kal v'chomer anymore. Why? Because the whole kal v'chomer was based on them bringing back the money. But Binyamin didn't bring back the money. Binyamin was not one of those. So the kal v'chomer doesn't apply to him. He may be an outright ganef, according to that argument. Of course, they don't hold of that, but the kal v'chomer is now not valid for the one who has taken the goblet. What is Yosef's response? Yosef says, don't give me this business about what you've sinned against God, God collecting punishment. That's got nothing to do with me. Chaliloli. If Hashem has found a place to collect punishment for the sin, I'm not responsible for that. That's got nothing to do with me. If the crime is done, then the punishment has to be paid. And what we can see clearly here is the chait, the sin. On this, I am judging the man in whom it was found, and you all go back into peace. It is at this point that we find that Yehuda changes from a passive mode to a forceful one. And there are a number of different opinions as to why and what changes. Let's have a look and see how the Rachaim understands it. With this, with this I can understand. My mind is at ease, is the word that the Rachaim uses. My mind is at ease in what we see that Yehuda speaks such words. Shazeh Yagid, because when a person says, oy vey, what can we say? Manadaba. When a person says something like that, what does that mean? It means basically, we've got nothing to say. It means, kalu lo divrei pius, v'kibel hamishpat. It means that the words of appeasement, any argument we can say, is not going to work. We are ready to accept the judgment. So that's a very passive mode. You can't get more passive than saying manomar, manadaber, bos kemen zogen, what can we do? And yet, says the Rachaim HaKadosh, and yet, toch k'dei dibur, almost seconds later, Vayigash, all of a sudden Yehuda approaches. The dibur dvarim atikim, and he now speaks strong words or words of. But how does that happen? Uladvareinu tzadka dvarim. Says the Rachaim, based on what I told you before, it'll be well understood. Because Mikoidem Choshav, initially, what did Yehuda think? What did the brothers think? They thought, Ki me Hashem yatsa hadavar. This is simply coming from Hashem to punish them. Matzah lekim avayna. That was until Yosef, until the viceroy of Egypt, made that statement that we're keeping Binyamin and you go back home. When they saw, when they saw that Yosef is only wants to keep Binyamin, and he says, this was a sign for us or for you. This is now no longer a punishment for any sin. And from here, this is simply a man exercising his cruel free choice, and he's made a cruel decision. This I will not accept. Vayigash elav Yehuda, and Yehuda now steps forward. So according to Rachaim HaKadosh, it's now that he steps forward, and it happens strategically after Yosef wants to take their brother Binyamin alone. The Parsha of Torah, which is a collection of sichos of the Rabbi, brings the following argument. Why did Yehuda now change from a passive mode to a forceful one? Similar, but a little bit different. Batchila in the beginning, Kibel. Yehuda is accepting, he's passive. Why? Because he sees this as the beginning of the Gezerah of exile. He knew, and his father told him, and it was a tradition through the ancestors, right back from Avraham Avinu, at the Bris Ben Absorim, at the covenant between the pieces, that the Jewish people would have to descend into Egypt for hundreds of years, etc., and other lands as well. And he thought that now this is the beginning of Golus. Well, if that's the case, so be it. We'll accept it. Manomar, manadaber. But now that Yosef wants to take Binyamin and to send back the other brothers to their land of Canaan, that's not the beginning of Golus at all. On the contrary, that's the opposite of the decree, because now most of the brothers, in fact, all of the brothers other than Binyamin, are going back to the land of Israel, back to the land of Canaan. So therefore, there's something else happening here. This is not a Gezerah of Golus. I'm stepping forward. Vayigash elav. The Das Zakeni, Balatosfos, says, why did he step forward now? Vayigash elav, and he approached him. And he takes a very interesting perspective. We know that in Pirkei Avos it says, Marbe avodim, marbe gozo. Marbe, it said there's a whole lot of things which the Prikavas counts up there, and it says the more of this, the more of this, the more of this, the more of this, the more avodim, the more slaves that a person has, the more employees, the more gezel, the more robbery that there will be. That's what it says in Prikavas. The more avodim, the more slaves, the more robbery. In fact, an Eved had a reputation of being a robbery. Very often, a person was sold into slavery because he was a Ganav. Okay. So now, Rabbi Yehuda is now telling Yosef as well, you want to take our brother Binyamin as an Eved? You've just accused him as being as the Ganav. You've just said now that he will be the man. He's the criminal. B'noheg sheba olam. The normal practice is, if a person buys an Eved from the market, from the slave market, and he finds it's a Ganav, he'd return it back. He'd say faulty goods, machziroi. V'zeh, and this fellow, this Benjamin who you want to take, shenimtza Ganav, he's found out to be a Ganav according to your words, and you want to take him as an Eved? That's totally not nonsensical. And therefore, Vayigash elav. Very interesting approach. So that leads us to the beginning of the Parsha. Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda approaches him and he says, Bi Adoni, please my master. Yidaber na abdecha davar ba'oznei Adoni. Let your servant speak something in the ears of my master. Don't get angry with your servant, because you are like Pharaoh. Now tonight we won't have time to discuss everything on this pasuk, but we will look at some of the phrases and nuances in the pasuk through the commentaries. First of all, Yehuda approaches and he says, Bi Adoni, please my master. And he says, Yedaber nadaber be'oznei Adoni. Let your servant speak words in the ears of a master. What does that expression mean? Davar be'oznei Adoni. So we look at Rashi first, and Rashi says the following words, Yikonsu davarai be'oznecha. May my words enter your ears. But what does Rashi mean by that? What is Rashi trying to rule out? What's he excluding by saying these words? Yikonsu davarai be'oznecha. May my words enter your ears. And here we have a differing opinions, the Mizrahi and the Maskil David, and they are as follows. The Mizrahi, one of the earliest commentators on Rashi, says that what Rashi wants to tell us here is not that Yosef wants to literally whisper something, that Yehuda wants to whisper into the ears of the viceroy of Egypt. That's not the normal thing to do. You don't go up to the king and say, I'd like to tell you some secret. Or even with someone who stands in the place of the king, we're having your mouth next to his ears. That would not be Bakovidic at all. Well, it's also not Kovidic as well. But that would not be the minig at all. Not a good thing to do. And therefore, says Rashi has to tell us that what does it mean by Davar ba'oznei Adoni? It means, may my words enter your ears. The Maskil David refuses to accept that explanation. He says no. He says, Rashi is not intending, that wasn't bothering Rashi to tell us that it doesn't mean in his ears, literally in his ears, because we find several times earlier on, such as in the Parsha of Vayera, Vayashkim Avimelech, and Melech got up, Vayadaber, and he spoke, etc., but Oznehem in their ears. So the king is telling them in their ears what has happened. What, the king goes up and whispers in everybody's ears? Surely it doesn't mean that. And yet Rashi doesn't feel the need to explain it even. And so it is several times. Says the Maskil David, what Rashi was concerned about was the word davar. That seems to be extra. Yedaber na avdecha davar be'oznei Adoni. Let your servant speak a word in the ears of a master, or let your servant speak something in the ears. Why do you need the word davar? Why not just say, let your servant say or speak into the ears of my master? It's the word davar that bothered Rashi here. And therefore he says that it's to be interpreted in the following way. Why did Yehuda add this word davar? Because what he's saying is, Yedaber not abdecha, let your servant speak. But whatever I speak, davar, whatever I speak, whatever word I say, please, I let it penetrate into you. But oznei, let it go into the ears of a master. It wasn't the word oizen, ears, that were bothering Rashi. It was the word dover instead. And that is the first time we encounter such an expression in Tanakh or in the Chumash, and therefore Rashi feels the need to explain it. When we look at the Medrash, we find that there were three plans Yehuda had in mind when approaching Yosef. What were they? Well, we have a three-year machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemiah, and Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda says he was ready for war, Hagosh Milchama. And he brings a proof from the Pasuk in Shmuel, where there the word Vayigash is used, where Yoav, the chief of the army, approached. They approached for war. Rabbi Nechemiah says no, it was Lapius, it was for appeasement. Where do you see that? And he brings a pasuk from Yehoshua. The Bnei Yehuda approached Yehoshua, Vayigshu lefaisoi, and they approached to pacify him. The Rabbanon say it was for davening, and they bring a pasuk from the book of Malachim, Vayigash Eliyahu Hanavi Vayomer, and Eliyahu Hanavi approached and he said, Hashem, the God of the Jewish people, and he davens there. Rabbi Elazar Amar, he says, Poshat Lahain. Rabbi Elazar says that Yehuda is telling him all three. He says, Im le'melchama, aniva. If it's for war, I'm ready to come. If it's lapius, if it's ready to pacify, I'm ready for that too. If it's for davening, I'm ready for there as well. In fact, Rabbi Elazar says all three. But what's also interesting is that even though when you look at the pasuk itself, he's asking the king not to get angry, but what were the words, or what were the threats, if you like, that could see the king getting angry? Now, some of this we will know from our Rashi, but some of them we won't. This is not everything is in the Rashi that we read. Let's see the first threat. The first threat is Zekanto Shelzeh, the grandmother of this child or great-grandmother of this child that you want to keep, was once taken by Pharaoh for one night, and boy did he get it. He was struck with Nagoyim, with Tsaras, he and all his household, as indeed it says, Vayigash Emispare. He's a hair, I'm warning you. This could happen to you. See to it that you don't get Tsaras as well. He uses the more polite oisah ish, that man, in third person. Second threat. The mother of this child died because of a curse of dad. When his dad said, when Rachel was sitting on the trophies or trophim of his father, whosoever has your God, small g, lo yichya, will not live. And from those words, unintentionally, his wife dies, Rachel dies, the mother of Binyamin. If that's the case, with an unintentional curse, he's zaher, be careful, that you won't get upon you one klala, one curse, and end up dying. Oisah again refers to him. What's the third threat that's made by Yehuda in securing the release of Binyamin? Two of us have gone into one city, a complete city, and absolutely decimated it for one girl that was taken. Here, it's for a zacha, for one boy. Here, al chibas ha'ayin ba, it's for the boy who is the ball of his father's eye. Chibas ha'ayin. It is the brother in whose territory God will choose to make his achsanya, to make his lodging. Because what does it say? Where was the Beis Hamikdash built? It was built in the territory of Binyamin. Chofei falov kol hayoim, as it says, God hovers over him the whole day. And if you're trying to play with him, alachas kama v'kama, how much more so that you will suffer destruction, the whole city, the Egypt, etc., the country of Egypt. But one of the interesting medrashim that we find, and that really needs explanation, is the medrash when it gives a graphic description of what's meant by Yehuda's words, Yedaberna avdecha davar. Let your servant speak something, davar. And again, the medrash was probably bothered again by this word, davar, Why the need for the word davar? As we learned before earlier, according to the Maskil David, that puzzled Rashi as well, that bothered Rashi as well. The Medrash says the following, quite a graphic description here. Davar acher, says the Medrash. Yedaber na'abdecha, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Shmaya, Dever ani moitzi mibifnim, I will produce a plague from within my body. Umachnis dever benoi, and it's going to infect you. This plague that I have within me is going to absolutely infect you, umachale eschem, and destroy you completely. That's how Rabbi Yirmiyah understood it. And he gets it from the word davar, almost reading it as dever. Your servant will speak, but when he speaks, that's myself, it'll produce such a plague that it'll absolutely devour you. At the time when Yehuda got angry, when he got furious, the hairs on his chest became stiff and toughened, and they broke through his clothes and protruded in this awesome, scary show of strength, of might, as the hairs of his body literally turned into almost like spears breaking through the clothes of his body. And then the final graphic description here is, Yehuda put blocks of metal in his mouth, would chew them, and out would come metal dust. Very, very strange medrash. He would put these blocks of metal in his mouth and produce avok, and produce dust, or metal dust. And of course, the Mefarshim look at this and they wonder, what does the medrash actually mean? Do we take it literally? And if we don't take it literally, what's the message that this medrash is telling us? Putting iron blocks in his mouth and producing dust from them. If we look at the Imrei Hadas from Rameir Shapiro of Lublin, we find that he says as follows. Lifamim, there are times that a person can speak something, the Mamed Kahol, in the front of a whole community, a large community, and every person in the audience will understand the words at their face value. Will take those words at their face value. And it'll take sometimes only one man in the audience that will really fathom the meaning of the speaker, who will understand what the speaker means, la'amitai, in its truth. When that happens, this is called medaber ba'oznai. That's called speaking to his ear. Why speaking to his ear? Because what the words have meant for that person were not meant for anybody else but that person. It's almost as if you're only speaking to him and no one else. Only he understands the secret of what your words mean, the content of what they mean, no one else. So let's have a look and see how that applies here. Because indeed, Yehuda uses those words, but Oznei Adoni, the ears of our master. And here we come to different meanings in the words spoken by one man, Yehuda here. Let's look at Rashi and see what the different meanings have. And they have very, very different meanings. On the one hand, let's look at the pshat, says Rashi. What's the pshat? Don't get angry with me. You are as choshev to me in my eyes as a king. So please, I'm begging of you, I'm asking nicely, don't get angry. That explanation, which is the pshat, which is the face value of his words, is what the rest of the people were to understand. The rest of the audience will understand exactly that meaning. You are as choshev to me in my eyes as the king. Dover acher, but there's another explanation. What does kichamocha kefaro mean? And Rashi brings several, but I'm bringing just one here of the Rashi. Im takni teini, if you anger me, I'll knock your block off. I'll kill you and your master. Amazing words. You anger me, I'll kill you and your master. You and your pharaoh. Who was that meaning intended for? Says the Imrei Das, says Rabbi Shapiro, That was intended for only one person in the audience, only for Yosef. He was to understand that. That's exactly what he was telling him. And therefore, what was happening was as follows. The Medrash tells us that he put metal blocks in his mouth, but produced dust. And we wondered, what does that mean exactly? Explains Rabbi Shapiro what that means was, on the one hand, it's like spears, it's like daggers coming out of his mouth or being put into his mouth. But for the rest of the people, it's only like powder, it's like dust. For the rest of the people, the face value, the pshat is, yes, you're choshev in my eyes, you're a king, I'm giving you due respect, etc. That's the powder, that's for everybody else, that's the pshat. But what's the hidden meaning? What is the Ashoshias Shel Barzel? What are the metal blocks that are in the mouth of Yehuda? That's the meaning that he reserves for one person in the audience, and that is for Yosef. And he wants Yosef to understand it. And in fact, he does. He does. Yosef gets scared, according to the Medrash, indeed. So this, according to Ramesh Shapiro, is what it means by the iron blocks in his mouth, producing dust from them, but it also explains why the Torah says, or why Yehuda uses the words "ba'oznei Adoni," the ears of my master. I'm going to speak, but what I speak will have a different meaning for you as it will for the rest of the people here. And therefore, ba'oznei Adoni. How interesting, says Ramesh Shapiro, that a similar example we find replicated in the mitzvah of Hakel, where once every 7 years, at the end of Sukkot, what would happen is you'd have the king standing up on the bimah, or the second day Sukkot, the king would stand up on the bimah, and he would be told to read the Torah be'ozneihem, in the earshot, in the ears of all the community. The king of Israel had to read the Torah. He had to read it in front of millions of people once every 7 years. But when he read it in such a way that the words of the Torah that he would read would penetrate every single Jew, according to whatever level they were on. The men, the women, the children, the clever, the fools, everybody together would get a message that was reserved particularly for them, and that was something extraordinary that only the king could do, the king being the heart of the Jewish people. Melech Yisrael, as the Rambam says, is the lev of Israel. Interesting. Ba'ozneihem, in their ears, every person according to their level of understanding and what they needed to hear. Well, why does it say Vayigash at all? Why does Yehuda have to approach? He's been standing close to Yosef fairly much until now. Second of all, Vayigash love Yehuda, and Yehuda approaches him. Why does it mention him? Why not simply say Yehuda approached? Obviously, he's approaching him. He's speaking to him. Why plead, "Be Adonai, please my master"? What does he mean by that plea? If it's a plea not to get angry, then he should have said those words next to the plea of Al Yicharab Chavavdecha, don't get angry with your servant. He doesn't do that. Let's have a look at the pasuk and see that to understand that better. Vayigash elav Yehuda, Yehuda approached, and he said, "Be Adonai, please my master. Let your servant please speak in the ears of my master, and then don't get angry." The Ohr HaChaim is asking here, wouldn't it be better if Bi Adonai was a plea and begging and asking for mercy? Wouldn't it be better to say, Vayigash elav Yehuda vayomer, and he said, "Let your servant speak words in the ears of my master." Then put the words, "Bi Adonai, please my master, don't get angry with me." These words, Bi Adonai, belong to Al Yicharabcha, don't get angry. And yet it seems almost as if that Bi Adonai, he's pleading for something else. Not just don't get angry. But what is it? What else is he asking here for? So we have 3 questions. Fourth question, what is meant by Ba'oznei Adonai, the ears of my master? A question which we've addressed already before by Rashi, by Ramesh Shapiro. And the 5th question, how can he beg the viceroy not to get angry if indeed kichamocha kefaroi? If you are like Pharaoh, then jolly well he should get angry if he's going to speak harshly with the king. All these questions were asked by the Rechaim HaKodesh, and I won't go over them in the Hebrew because we've just gone through them in English. Let's have a look and see how the Rechaim explains it in a unique manner. I haven't seen anybody else learn this way. Says the Rechaim HaKodesh, Yehuda breaks protocol. Why does he break protocol? It's known that the minhag of kings would be that they would have seated in front of them the heads of government. You'd have ministers, you'd have advisors, you'd have security people all around him. If a man ever wanted to come and speak and talk about some law, something, or beg something from the king, he would never, ever be allowed to stand directly before the king. There would always be a cordon between the king and him, with Sorim, with those who are sitting Rishona b'Malchus, first in the government, etc., etc. V'chutz le'igul, it would be outside the circle or the cordon of the king's private people or the ministers. That's where he would stand and speak. And that's exactly how Yehuda was speaking until now. Until this point of time, there is this cordon, there's this whole array, if you like, of security, of ministers, of advisors standing around Yosef, the viceroy of Egypt. But now he breaks protocol. Vayigash elov. He approaches him. He enters lifnim mechitzasai. He goes within the mechitza, within the boundary, within the barrier. And he's now standing between the king and the Sorim. It's just him facing Yosef. Kedei shelo yishmu devarav, in order that no one should hear his words except for the king. And indeed, the Rechaim HaKodesh quotes the Maharam al-Shakar in his Chuvas that says the difference in Hebrew between the word loy and elov is that loy means to him from a distance. But elov, vaydaber elov, when you speak to him, it's close. It's very, very up close. And that's what Yehuda does now. And he begs for a private audience with the king. He begs to talk now privately. He's begging the king. Please, please, I want you to agree. I need to speak to you privately. And therefore he says, Bi Adoni. He says, please, my master, let your servant speak words in the ears of my master. Be'en shomea zoloscha. I'm doing this so that no one else can hear what I'm telling you. And that could not be done if I don't do it just in your ears. But I have to ask you, he asks him, he begs him, why? Because he doesn't want Yosef, the viceroy of Egypt, to get angry about asking for something, about breaking protocol, about breaking all the rules. And therefore he says, Al yichar apcha b'avdecha, don't get angry with your servant. Pirush, that means, Ki derech ze yasu gedolim hashavim begereg gdola. Because it's almost like he's putting himself on an equal stature with the viceroy, with the second in command of Egypt. Lo yaved ladona. This is not what a servant does for his master, and therefore he adds the word ba'avdecha. Let your servant speak. Your servant. I still maintain that I'm your aved. And why? Ki kamocha gafari, because you are like Pharaoh. And Pirush, that means al derech ma'aser shuva b'Gemara. It's similar to a story that actually happened in Gemara with Katia bar Shalom, to whom they said, Nitzachta lemalka, you've won the argument with the king, but anyone who wins the argument of the king, it's big trouble for him. Let's have a look at that story which Rechaim HaKodesh quotes and see how Yehuda doesn't want to end up in that situation. The tragic story of Katia bar Shalom begins with a brisa saying, quoting a pasuk in the Gemara by Zorah Daf Yud, Lo yeh sorid leves Esav, there will never be a remnant of the house of Esav. Lakol, yochel lakol, I might think, really nothing? Really no remnant? Talmud Loma leves Esav, of the house of Esav. Says the Gemara, when one acts like an Esav, those generations or those descendants, there will be not a remnant. And then the Gemara brings another pasuk in Yechezkel, Shama Edom, Melachah v'chol Neseh. Edom there will be laid waste, its kings and all its princes. All its princes. Kol Nesiah. So he says, yes. Melacheha v'lo kol melacheha. Not all the kings. Kol Nesiah, all her princes, but not all her officers. And the Gemara brings two examples of amazing people that came from Esav. Not all the kings, that's Antoninus ben Asverus, who had a tremendous relationship with Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, and all the Seah, all her leaders, not all her officers though, all her leaders, but not all officers, to exclude Katia bar Shalom. Katia bar Shalom from Esav is excluded from destruction. There's a special spot reserved for him. Who was this Katia bar Shalom? Mayhavi. The Gemara says, the Kisra, there was the Tsar, the Caesar, the Roman Caesar, who hated the Jews. And he turned to the Chashuv de Malchusa, he turned to the Chashuv, the nobles of his kingdom. And he asked them, if you've got a sore on your foot, should you cut it out and then you can live in peace? Or should you let it fester? And they said to him, of course he should cut it out and live. And therefore, he said to them, and therefore, what he was trying to say was, the Jews are like a festering on my, like a boil, like a plague on my feet. I've got to really get rid of them. And one minister spoke up, Katia bar Shalom, and he said, Your Majesty, he says, one point I want to make is, you'll never destroy them all. There'll always be Jews festering around. You'll never destroy them all. As it says in the book of Zechariah, and he quotes the pasuk, because like the four winds of the heaven, I have spread you. And this is a strange verse. Like the four winds, like the four directions of the heavens, I have spread you. It should have said in the four directions, if it meant scattering. But what the pasuk Zechariah is telling us, said Katia bar Shalom, is just like the world needs winds to make the plants grow, to move things around, to move the clouds, to move the rain. Just like a world needs winds, so also the world needs Jews. There will always be Jewish people. You will never be able to succeed. Don't start up. And second of all, Your Majesty, Korulach Malchusa Kitia. They will be known, your kingdom will be known as the murderous kingdom. How would you like to go down in history as the kingdom that butchered the Jews? Not a good reputation. Amalei, the Caesar accepted the argument, both arguments. Meimer Shapakamar, he says, you spoke well. Miubat, called the Zachi de Malka, anyone who beats the king in an argument like that, gets the punishment of the Kamunya Chalila. It was a terrible, terrible way to die. What they would do is they would lower a person through a chimney or through a roof of a house or a room, and the room was completely full of sand. And they would lower the person in, and he would sink into the mountain of sand and eventually suffocate to death as he would go down. And they did this to Katilian Bal Shalom, who actually succeeded in saving the Jewish people from that Gezerah anyway. And the Gemara says that as they took him and they lowered him, there was his matronissa, there was his Roman governess who said, Oi, Vaile Ilfa de Osla Blomirsa. She saw this self-sacrifice of this Jew, not this Jew, of this Roman coming from Esav, Katil Rashalom. She says, woe to the ship that hasn't paid the taxes. In other words, this man, he might as well be Jewish. He's protected them, but he hasn't got the mark of a Jew. He hasn't had circumcision, and he's going to leave this world, and he's like a ship without the taxes. He hasn't paid the registration fee. Immediately, Katia bar Shalom fell, bent down. Al Reisha bent his head down. The Ullah say and cut, and he gave himself a bris milah. He did immediately a circumcision, and he declared and he said, Yehovah's michse, I've now paid the taxes. Chalfis avris, and I can go. And ki kashodale, when they threw him to his death, he declared, I give all away all my possessions to the great rabbi of the Jewish people, Rabbi Akiva, and his friends. And then the Gemara says something about Rabbi Akiva, which I'm not going to go into here. A Yotzes Baskal v'Omra, a Baskal went out and said, Ketir bar Shalom, get straight into Olam Haba. And Rabbi Yehuda Anossi heard this, he cried and he said, Yesh kon Olam b'sha'achas, you can have a person who acquires his world in 1 hour. And some others have to take years and years and years to acquire Olam Haba. What an amazing man, this person is. Says the Orach HaKodesh, quoting this Gemara, this story, Yehuda did not want to share the same fate. Lozeh, therefore, says the Orach HaKodesh, if Yehuda would have beat Yosef in front of all those around, he would have come into Sakonas Mavis. He would have put himself into danger. It would be like suicide. Because he would then be called the one who beat the king in an argument publicly. And in order that he shouldn't say, oh, look, the king is Pharaoh. Therefore he says, no, you are to me as important as Pharaoh. You have the same law. And that's the reason I'm breaking protocol. And that's why I'm begging to speak in your earshot alone. And because even if I'll win in my arguments, at least you won't be embarrassed. There won't be bizoin for you. And therefore I will not be called a notzeach lamelech, one who conquered the king, who will be chayiv, because it's only between me and between you. It's beini uvencha. That's how the Orach HaKodesh understands why it had to be in this way. And in this beautiful way, he's answered all 5 questions that we asked before. It explains what is meant by Azne Adonai, why he begs him Kichamocha Kefaroi, why he says Bi Adonai. If it's not a plea to get angry, it's explaining why he's now moving, breaking the cordon. It explains why it says he approached him, because he's going up close to him. And it explains why it needs to say Vayigash. Yes, he had been standing close, but now he's moving right close up, going through the cordon and standing just in front of the Viceroy himself. Fascinating Orach HaKodesh answering all those questions. Then the Orach goes on to talk about the word Elov, and the focus is on himself now. Let's have a look at some of the explanations offered for Elov to him. Alternatively, says the Orach HaKodesh, Yehuda did not want to speak, or only wanted to speak Elov to him. Why? Because they now understood, the brothers understood, Yehuda understood, that this gezerah is not coming from Hashem as a punishment. As I explained, says Orach Chaim, in the previous Parsha, as we started off tonight, learning in the end of Miketz, that Yehuda is stepping forward now, because as soon as Binyamin is now being taken and they are being let free, that is not a punishment for them. When he says, Chalila, I will not take you, I'll let you all go free. And if it's not coming from Hashem as a punishment, this is coming directly from Yosef. It's coming from, of course, everything comes through Hashem, but it's not coming as a punishment, as Hashgacha Pratis, because of what they did. It's Yosef exercising his Bechira, and now it's Elov. I'm talking to you as a person. I'm now not begging, etc., and saying Manu Mar, Manu Daber. It's a totally different now attitude. Another reason Elov appears, perhaps, says the Orach HaKodesh, the word Elov also appears because he's saying this for the good of Yosef. He's saying, as Rashi himself says, what do you want? You want to take my brother Binyamin, our youngest baby brother, you want to take him because you want to make him your personal eved, your personal security guard, your employee, your servant. I'm better than him in any way you want. Vayigash Elov, he approaches him, says the Orach Chaim, Pirish, that means to be taina, anything that you could use this Binyamin for, I'll be better. So therefore it's Elov. You, Yosef, stand to gain personally. Furthermore, Yehuda needs to justify how he has changed his previous offer. We remember at the end of Miketz that Yehuda said, Manomar hinena avodim, gam anachnu, gam asher nimtzach b'yadai. That was their first offer. The first offer Yehuda made as soon as the cup was found in the sack of Benjamin was, we're all going to be slaves, all of us, including the one in whose possession the cup was found. Now, all of a sudden, that's changed. In Vayigash, that offer is totally changed. And Yehuda could be called to task. How are you contradicting yourself? Before you said we're all servants, slaves, and now you're saying what? Now you're saying that you're offering yourself only, and everyone else should go back home. Therefore, Yehuda needs to say, why I'm changing my argument, it's because you changed. A love. What I'm telling you now, that Yeshiv na Abdecha, let me stand instead of him, let him go back with his brothers, that's a love. That's because of what you said. I'm doing that because of your words, Joseph, or your words, Your Highness, the Viceroy of Egypt, who you entertain such a thought to say, Khalila, that you don't want to take all of us as servants, you only want to take the brother. Oh, no. Now I'm changing. Now I'm putting myself there. Yeshiv na Abdecha. He's explaining with the word Elov why he's changing. But he says, Bi Adoni. He says, Yedav ben Abdecha, Bi Adoni, please, my master. Please, my Lord. And here we find that Meforshim all talk about this expression. Let's have a look at that expression again. Yedav ben Abdecha davar baznei, but he says, Bi Adoni. He doesn't just say be, please. He says, Bi Adoni, please, my master. It's these words here that we're going to focus now as we draw the shir, as we draw to a close tonight. Bi Adoni, please, my master. Let's have a look and see how the Orach HaKodesh takes this. Bi Adoni. There are three reasons he offers. Number one, Yehuda is not the oldest brother. And Yosef might indeed say, hey, you're not the oldest of the brothers. Why are you opening your mouth? And Yosef knew who the oldest was. After all, Yosef seated them in order of age, as we learnt last week's Parsha, something that made them that bamboozled them. They were so astonished about that. Kiruben Abachor. And the viceroy of Egypt knew that. As they sit before him in that way, he tells them to sit that way. So in that case, why are you speaking so much? You're not the oldest brother. For this reason, he has to say, Bi Adoni. With me, I am the one who needs to put this. So as he says in the end, it's me because I took the initiative to guarantee the safe return. And in case he gets angry, he has to first say that. Bi Nogeya Hadovar. For me, I stand to lose the most. That's why I'm opening my mouth. Strangely, in the second explanation, the Orach HaKodesh says, please, my Lord, maybe for a second reason. You say that Binyamin, our youngest brother, stole the cup. It's not true. I stole it. Bi Adoni, look at me, my master, look at me. Pirish, ani ganavti hagavir. I was the one who planted it. I put it in the sack of Benjamin. Now, shura sadin titain kihuli lached. It's now, it should be that I'm the one who should be taken as a prisoner. Because Binyamin makrish, Binyamin is denying it. Yehuda is confessing it. So I should be the abbot. So according to this explanation, in these words, Bi Adoni, he's saying you're looking for a culprit. You're looking for someone to blame. If there's anyone to blame, blame me. And finally, in the third explanation, Yehuda is saying Bi Adoni with a very different tune, It says the Orach HaKodesh, the third remez the Pasuk is telling us is, the word no could mean please, but the word no in Hebrew can also mean now. In fact, the word no has three meanings. It could mean raw, it could mean now, or it could mean please. And in this explanation, the third explanation, the Orach HaKodesh takes the word no as meaning now. Let's have a look at it. Remez HaKos of the Pasuk is hinting, Ki hasrora elov nasuna. The royalty is given to him. And what he's saying is as follows. Bi talui kinoi teves Adoni. He's telling Yosef, if anyone should be the Lord, it's me. I am Judah. I am the king. I was the one who will be declared king by my father. I'm the Lion King. Gur Aryeh Yehuda. Ki hu HaMelech. He's really the king. V'oi yedaber na. But now that you will speak, Abdecha, I'm speaking as your servant. That's only no. That's only now. Bikinoi abdus, the fact that I use the description as a slave, as your servant, that's temporary. That's lepisha. It's not going to stay that way forever. Yehuda hu amelach, Yehuda is the king. Bekiso yikonolam, and his throne will stay forever. So in this manner, Yedabernav d'chadavar, what he's saying is whether the viceroy will understand it or not. He's saying, yes, I admit now your servant will speak, but there'll come a time where this will be reversed, and my true role as the king will be exhibited, because bi'adoni, really, I am the master. Furthermore, there may be a hint dropping from Yehuda's mouth, and we see this throughout Chumash, throughout Tanakh, that people say things sometimes with an unintended prophecy. And if we look at these words, bi'adoni, says the Racham HaKodesh as a remez. This is not pshat. The Racham admits it's not pshat, but he says perhaps there's an unintended prophecy, which he didn't even know that he was saying. That when Yehuda says these words, bi'adoni, my master, Pirush, that means be'emtsa'usi hasogazeh. Sorry, be'emtsa'usi hisagtazeh. It's because of me that you are now my master. Hisagtazeh, you are able to achieve such glory, such power, the second in command of the greatest metropolis in the world. Kihu hasovev leYosef adnos. When all is said and done, I am the one who brought Yosef to be the ruler, to bring him to such a greatness. Sha'amar, after all, it was Yehuda who suggested, L'chu v'nam kirena la'Yishmaelim, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. Shemizen isgalgal adover b'hisig Yosef adnos. And it's from this that events evolved that finally led into Yosef being declared the Adon al Kol Mitzrayim, the master lord of Egypt. I know, obviously, Yehuda doesn't know he's saying this, but how interesting that bi'adoni, in those words, this is unintended prophecy. Yes, through me, you have become the master. Finally, we'll finish off with the words of the Imrei Das, the Maram Shapiro, and that is that the meeting of Yehuda and Yosef is the clash of kings. Yehuda is the king, Yosef is the king, and David HaMelech devotes a pasuk, a whole chapter in Tehillim, giving ramazim to this. The kings meet as they pass together, passing or angry, says the Medrash. They're fuming one with each other. Who are the kings? Yehuda and Yosef. Hey Maro Kentamohu, says the verse in the same chapter in Tehillim. They see, they're astonished. These are the brothers as they astonish him, watching this clash happening. Nivhalu nechpozu, they're shocked. They're gripped with fear. This is the brothers not able to answer. Ra'ada chazasam sham, fear grips them there. These are the tribes as they say, Malachim edainim elu meilu. The kings are fighting out. They're battling with each other. Onu ma'ich paslona. What can we do? What difference does it make to us? Let the king fight with the king. Who are we to join in? And then Vayigash of Yehuda approaches. Echad be'echad yigashu. One to one they approach. This is Yehuda and Yosef. V'ruach lo yavo b'neihem. And the wind will not pass between them. These are the tribes. As they say, as the kings battle it out, how can we get involved? So the Maram Shapiro on this Medrash, that the Medrash is hinting to the fact that there will come a time where there will be the Mashiach ben Yosef heralding or coming before the Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben Yosef coming from the tribe of Yosef, and the Mashiach ben David coming, of course, from the tribe of Yehuda. And in the Haftarah, or in the Tanakh, when it talks about Elu ve'elu, as they're coming with each other, it's the meeting, if you like, of these two Mashiachim. Says Maram Shapiro, how interesting, that the only two tribes that were innocent of the sin of the spies were Yosef, at least from one of the tribes, and that was from Ephraim, Yeshua ben Nun, and Kalev ben Yefuneh, coming from the tribe of Yehuda. Explains to Maram Shapiro that when they were accused of being spies right at the start, when they came down to Egypt, Meraglim atem, what are they saying? What is Yosef saying? There's a hint to the fact that there will be Meraglim coming from all of you. And it is at that point Yehuda steps forward and says, Yes, spies from all of us, but not from me. I will have a faithful a mission, a faithful shliach in the form of Yeshua ben Nun, and you will have one as well, Ephraim ben Manasseh. And it is this joining, if you like, of the two tribes coming together that have the formula of the Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef coming together as well. And have everybody a good night. Colton.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Broh. Fascinating as usual. Miri Maltas.
תודה רבה, כרמלה. תודה רבה.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rebecca.
Thank you, Rabbi Broh.